posso.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
Allora, velocemente io finisci il ragionamento che tra poco ci sarà appunto l'avviamento del nuovo decreto. Sì, volevo semplicemente dire che appunto Kim ha salutato Biden dicendo e esibendo a quelle poche persone che hanno potuto vedere televisione due nuovi visti
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the city of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What you are all about to be part of America is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's Own United States Marine Band.
Jennifer Lopez. Sì? Tutta vestita di bianco.
Biden le vuole bene, Jennifer Lopez. Non gli piacciono Trump, lei non le piace Trump.
Neanche a me piace.
No, perché l'hanno mandata via tutte le sue pesani.
This land is your land. This land is my
Con gli
land.
suoi cazzi balla.
From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land. Oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land. Oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. You and me. America, God shed His grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining
Una nación bajo Dios indivisible con libertad y justicia para todos.
Let's get loud. This land was made for you
Dopo te lo dico, sì.
Sappiamo un po' come la storia dei territori americani che sono americani ma non lo sono, la loro identità oggi è la cultura sembrava andare avanti in Florida. Se avessi voluto avere le immagini sotto compressione come esibito tecnicamente, certo uno schermo diviso in due sarebbe stata una bella immagine.
Well, that was great. The sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States,
Joe
John
Biden,
Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Giuro solennemente.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
E adempiere con fedeltà
degli Stati Uniti e al meglio delle mie abilità preserverò, proteggerò e difenderò la Costituzione degli Stati Uniti. Che Dio mi aiuti. Complimenti, signor Presidente.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
L'avete vista anche prima di presentare tutta la cerimonia, ricorderete che era una degli avversari di Joe Biden nelle primarie democratiche, prima poi di
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Lasciare un po' la strada al presidente che è stato adesso eletto. Vediamo lì in fondo Barack Obama che ha per ora non è stato neanche tanto inquadrato, fino al momento del suo arrivo. Barack Obama, Giovanna, che ha avuto un ruolo molto importante nella vittoria di Joe Biden, probabilmente, anche perché è stato anche grazie ad alcune telefonate e pressioni di Obama che alcuni rivali del Partito Democratico sono fatti da parte per fargli strada durante le primarie, no?
Sì, assolutamente, non è entrato subito a gamba tesa nella gara primarie l'ex presidente Barack Obama, ma quando è entrato si è fatto sentire. Non dimentichiamoci che quasi l'80% dei nuovi membri del gabinetto Biden ha lavorato in qualche modo, ha avuto comunque un passato nel gabinetto di Barack Obama. Un'ultima cosa sulla First Lady, su Jill Biden, entra oggi alla Casa Bianca per la prima volta un po' l'Italia, perché è la prima First Lady di origine italo-americana. Questo va ricordato in questa
la Casa Bianca entra per la prima volta.
È vero, c'è anche un po' di Italia. Adesso vediamo Joe Biden che si alza, chiamato da Enoch, si avvicina al palco e ascoltiamo il suo discorso.
My fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden Jr.
46esimo Presidente degli Stati Uniti.
Chief Justice Roberts,
Joseph Robert Biden.
Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's Day. This is Democracy's Day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We're good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far. But we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country has taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America. We've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh. All of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again. Hear one another. See one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand, where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, We mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed staring at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, or rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, We're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching.
C'è sangue
Watching all of
italiano.
us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them, becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind and for our country.
In questo momento di nuovo ci metteremo alla prova. Saremo sempre in grado di rialzarci. Saremo sempre forti, saremo sempre resilienti. Perché ci sono così tante cose da fare.
This is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, They gave their best. They did their duty. They healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch, but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Grazie a lei.
Avevamo detto proprio stamattina che una delle parole che ci saremmo aspettati in questo discorso è stata unità, però io voglio sottolineare con voi altre chiave di questo discorso, verità molto interessante da parte di
Per capire la verità. No, Bush è lì, sta dormendo, ma che tempo sta dormendo? Ma no?
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
L'obbligo di rispettare la verità, di rispettare i fatti, ha voluto richiamare diciamo la politica americana a questo e poi ancora,
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Garth Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Dedicato alle 400.000 vittime del Covid-19 e ricordavamo unità sicuramente come parola importante. Invito a tutti da mettere da parte le differenze, la rabbia, ha sottolineato che non esistono conservatori, non esistono democratici, non esistono le persone delle campagne, le persone della città, alla fine siamo un paese unito e soprattutto in un momento di così grave crisi.
Amazing grace, how
Singer, songwriter, Garth Brooks. Non posso.
then saved a wretch like me.
Che ha fatto al Senato, a differenza di molti degli ultimi presidenti.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
I'm going to ask you to sing this last verse with me.
When we've been there 10,000 days, bright and shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first
Alessandro Platterotti, è un'impresa secondo te
I'd like to ask you to sing this last verse with me. Not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Allora qua ogni volta che ci sono questi spettacoli
I once was lost,
nasce il dramma,
but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
La sua presidenza, cioè dire ha detto la democrazia è fragile. Trump non l'ha detto, la democrazia americana per Trump era ed è in assoluto, assolutamente inaccettabile, assolutamente non giudicabile. Lui ha ammesso che la democrazia può essere distrutta dalla disinità, dalla mancanza di qualche obiettivo comune e soprattutto dalla mancanza di volontà di ascoltarsi nell'importante. Perché questo è stato un altro dei punti.
Hard not to be reminded of
configuratore può comportare le caratteristiche di tutti i materiali e qui può avere
il massimo dell'uomo.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Chi è questa, Amanda?
E noi abbiamo imparato che cosa significa il mostro, sappiamo che cos'è il futuro. Sarà come questo? No. Noi sappiamo che in qualche modo riusciremo.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Mama!
Thank you, Amanda Gorman. Now for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
Gli investigatori sono stati in grado di ricostruire che i tre detenuti avevano scavalcato il recinzione, avevano saltato un paio di sezioni di filo spinato e nell'ultima recinzione...
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration.
Ancora.
We pray for
Nori, ho detto di zitto.
President Joseph
Dati là che devo telefonare.
and our
Forza.
First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family.
Hai capito o no?
We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace, not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences, we'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Certo, certo.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and remain in your seats while the President and official party depart the platform. For safety reasons, your ushers will release your section in an organized manner, following the playing of our national march, The Stars and Stripes Forever.
Well, Janet, we really witnessed something today. What did we witness? Janet, we really witnessed something today. What did we witness? Secession, orderly, disciplined. Orderly, disciplined secession. I'd like to make a couple of remarks in terms of Abraham Lincoln. He was quoted 3 times, now not by necessarily President Biden, but from the time the ceremony started. And 2 of the quotes were coming from his inauguration. How about the first youth poet, Amanda Gorham? She was tremendous, using words like rebuild and recovery. But she's awfully skilled in alliteration.
Yes, Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb, an uplifting moment. Poets have been included in the ceremony. 1961, we were talking a little bit earlier, Robert Frost, that year for Kennedy's inauguration, read a poem, and it's one of these ways in which this tradition is expanding and contracting, right? There are different things each year, and there are some things that are the same from one to the next, but one constant is the peaceful transfer of power.
You know, at times during inaugural ceremonies, you can see things that look regal, and then you have something that was just so common and it just fit. Garth Brooks walking down the staircase and singing Amazing Grace, and when he left, it's as if his horse was hitched on the east side of the Capitol and he rode off. It was just wonderful.
You know, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Chairman Blunt said, we're witnessing an event both commonplace and miraculous. And I think you just summed it up right there. The commonality that we feel when we see musical performances, when we hear live music, and then this miraculous moment where we see this changeover of power. And it's something which is unique to the United States, this ceremony. Nobody else does anything like this. And nobody else has a live stream feed like ours, because we have cameras in places.
Even now.
We have cameras in places nobody else does. So we're getting some angles here. You can see the Obamas there.
Secretary Chow behind Mrs. Obama. Senator McConnell's wife.
That's VP Harris's children just behind them. Cole and Ella. Ella has the decorated shoulders on her jacket. There's Clinton, former President Clinton with the Obamas there as well. And this is the part where everybody gets up and starts to make their way back off the platform, back into the Capitol. We saw VP Harris and her husband going through the crypt a few moments ago.
You know, President Biden, within the first sentence or two, used these three words: our determined democracy.
That's the theme. That's the theme of this 59th inaugural ceremonies. That's the theme that the JSEC selected, and a wonderful phrase to encapsulate this: our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. And a few people made reference to it. You also mentioned how Biden's inaugural speech, he quoted others. And there's so many famous quotes that come to us from presidential inaugural speeches.
That's why inaugurations are so important. I mentioned earlier about Thomas Jefferson's quote. What about Andrew Jackson mentioning about government? That it should be for the good of the people, and that the people will direct, and that government should respect the privacy of persons and position. Andrew Jackson. We could go on about
FDR. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And Lincoln, the better angels of our nature, comes from one of his inaugural speeches. This is a moment where, and they vary in length. We've had long inaugural speeches in our nation's history. We've had short ones. We've had fatally long inaugural speeches.
Poor President Harrison, you had to bring that up. President Reagan mentioning, hey, it's not the people that have failed government. It's government that needs to be accountable to the people. And we see President Obama there, who's in his inaugural address, his first one, the remaking of America.
There's the poet Amanda Gorman there at the lower right of your screen. And President Obama hugging Lady Gaga.
The lady, what a tremendous rendition of the national anthem.
An incredible performance.
I'm not sure if that was a designer of a dress or an architect of the dress. That is.
She's certainly found something to rival the architecture and the iconography of the Capitol. And we've talked a little bit about fashion choices, how to stand out in the crowd.
Now, you mentioned this.
There we are, the young poet, Amanda Gorman, shaking hands with former President Clinton.
Now, you just mentioned Miss Gorman, who has a speech impediment. And Janet, who else has a speech impediment?
President Biden.
How about Maya Angelou?
Maya Angelou, another poet who has spoken. So that's the poet Amanda Gorman in the yellow jacket. And we see Lady Gaga and Michelle Obama hugging here.
A few pictures taken there.
We're
go back to the East Front.
East Front steps.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not over. What do we mean by it's the departure of Mr. Pence?
There's just as many iconic ceremonies that happen after the swearing of the oath as there are before. And there are just as many moments for us to watch and see these behind-the-scenes perspectives. I believe that's Hillary Clinton there, with the purple scarf.
No, I've just been someone that at times when we finished our assignments, which casually worked my way to the East Front, and there's hundreds, if there's more than a few thousand people for the departure ceremony. There's prayer that's rendered. There's pomp and circumstance. It's ceremonial.
Well, again, we talked a little bit earlier about how where is the president inaugurated versus where is the president not inaugurated. And this happens here at the Capitol, the home of the legislative branch, the home of Congress. And then so this departure ceremony, this moment where our new president and vice president depart from the Capitol and into their term, really is a historic moment, and it's a crucial part of this ceremony. Now, one thing that's different this year is that traditionally there is an inaugural luncheon that's held shortly after taking of the oaths.
In the old House chamber, known as Statuary Hall, well, as you said, this year because of the pandemic, we're not having it.
That's the poet Amanda Gorman there in the yellow jacket again. And a beautiful view of the dome here on the west front of the Capitol. Again, those flags there representing the center one is our current flag, 50 stars for 50 states. The ones at the far ends for the 13 colonies that were in the Union in the beginning.
Friends, we have a video clip for you right now.
When applicable, following the swearing-in ceremonies on the west front of the U.S. Capitol, the outgoing president and first lady leave the Capitol to begin their post-presidential lives. Traditionally, the president's departure takes place with little ceremony. In 1797, George Washington attended the inauguration of his successor, John Adams. With few exceptions, subsequent departing presidents followed Washington's example. Until the early 20th century, the departing president also usually accompanied the newly elected president on the carriage ride from the Capitol to the White House following the inauguration. In the early 20th century, a new tradition evolved whereby the outgoing president quietly left the Capitol immediately following the swearing-in ceremony. In 1909, after congratulating President Howard Taft, former President Theodore Roosevelt left the Capitol for Union Station, where he took a train to his home in New York. Outgoing Presidents Coolidge and Hoover also left the Capitol for Union Station, where they traveled home by train. Outgoing Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Johnson left the Capitol by car. In recent years, the newly installed President and Vice President have escorted their predecessors out of the Capitol after the swearing-in ceremony. The members of the JSIC gather on the stairs on the east front of the Capitol building and watch as the new Vice President escorts the outgoing Vice President and his spouse out of the Capitol through a military cordon. Then, the new President escorts the outgoing President and his spouse through the military cordon. Since Gerald Ford's departure in 1977, the former President and First Lady have left the Capitol grounds by helicopter, weather permitting.
Mi serve nessun permesso per andare, io sono un privato, sono un cittadino privato, devo prendere un appuntamento. Se devo andare a cambiare le gomme della macchina, cosa devo fare? E basta, non mi dicono niente.
We have these wonderful videos detailing some of the traditions behind our inauguration that we get to show you. And here we are preparing to see the departure going down the east front of the Capitol steps. The members of the Joint Committee are going to line up, and you can see VP Harris there in the purple getting ready. They're getting ready to head out the east doors, the rotunda behind them in this shot, going down through the military cordon and out to the waiting cars.
Have you noticed that the weather conditions have improved dramatically?
Well, we've had some weather changes today. I take back everything I said in the first hour of the broadcast about the nice 40-degree day that we had. We had some snow flurries in there, then the sun came out. We're really being taken for a ride today. You know, there were blizzard conditions for William Howard Taft's inauguration. They had to hold that one inside as well.
Notice who was the lead person out the east front. Eugene Goodman.
United States Capitol Police Officer Eugene O. Goodman there. He was the gentleman that you saw in the light-colored coat, acting Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms for the day. Here we go. The Harrises and Pence's walking down the steps, or excuse me, Mr. Emhoff and Ms. Harris going down the steps here. These front steps going through the military cordon and taking a moment on the east front steps together.
This has to be a pointed moment for particularly the Pences. We don't know what the future holds for them, but
you know, Al Gore was my college graduation speaker, and he said the moment that it took hold for him, that it was over, was when he walked away after this moment, and the Secret Service wasn't there, the car was, everything was different right at this moment, and that's when he realized really what the changeover was. He referenced that in his speech at my graduation.
You know, something that is going on right now that we can't see, the staff, meaning the outgoing staff, I'm sure are just probably in tears right now. I've seen that at a distance, and just knowing that this is final, this is.
I mean, I think
This
we'd
is
be
closure.
hard-pressed to think of anyone for whom this is not an emotional day. Not just the people who are directly involved in the administration, but the folks who work here at the Capitol who witness these every couple of years like we do, and the folks watching at home have got to have emotions bound up in these moments. And especially when you feel empathy for the various people and think of the emotions that are going through those heads. That's usually where it gets me. So we can see former VP Pence getting into the car here on the East Front, taking a last look at the Capitol and a wave to the staff and the military cordon, and the JSIC, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inauguration Ceremonies.
In time, we will have on the East Front the passing of the review, a review passing the review.
We'll see the pass and review here on
Yes.
the East Front in coming up in a little bit. We'll see them standing there and watching, reviewing all of the troops going by.
Now, I was not assigned to the Old Guard. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I've been in a lot of processions and reviews. And it feels like, for example, let's say President Biden is physically looking at everyone there. It's not the case, but as someone that has served, you feel that way.
Well, we were talking earlier about members of Congress, you know, making appearances on our tours and acknowledging the members of the public, folks from all over the country and people from all over the world that are visiting us. But the members of Congress, the senators, also frequently acknowledge us when we're in positions of support like
Questo è il
this.
coronavirus.
Representative
Sono i tuoi
John
parenti che mangiano quella roba lì.
Took the time to stop, recognize us, because one of the things that we do in addition to providing tours is to provide support for congressional events. And this, obviously, this is the granddaddy of congressional events for the year. Other times we're there for, like for Representative Lewis memorial service this past summer. But also congressional gold medal ceremonies. Great view of the East Front here.
Yes, you mentioned Mr. Lewis, that on those very steps where Vice President Harris and her husband are ascending now was this casket.
Yes, right where
this is all within the last year.
Standing, just this past summer, just about 6 months ago or so. That is where Congressman Lewis's casket was. And actually, Speaker Pelosi is standing in almost the exact same position the cameras captured her on that evening. And you can see the JSIC there as well. So members of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugurations, on inaugural ceremonies, they...
Excellent camera shot here. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, it's fabulous. Look at we can see everybody here.
Yes.
So just a reminder for the folks at home, Steny Hoyer there in the red scarf, the Speaker of the House in the teal coat that we see there, and that's Senator Blunt with her. He is the chair of this Joint Congressional Committee that is the official host of inaugurations and the host of our live stream today. And here they are all coming back in through the East Front door, making this turn. And then there are a few things that need to happen before we have some gift presentations coming up a little bit later on. That would normally happen during the inaugural luncheon.
The day is far from done. We have President Biden that has some ceremony signings in the President's room that President Washington thought of. To think back in 1780s that President Washington thought, let's have a President's room. It took until the 1850s for them to complete it.
Looking at the East Front of the Capitol, when you see it from a shot like this, we think of them as the new House and Senate, but of course, they're not that new.
No.
The new House and Senate chambers are at the far ends of the building. It's called a hyphen, the way that they're connected off the end there. So those are actually cropped out in this view of the East Front that we see here. So what you're looking at, if you can imagine, instead of that huge white painted cast iron dome, if you can imagine a shorter one, wood with a copper roof, and that copper roof, you know, turning green over time. That's an idea of what the Capitol looked like back when Jefferson, well, not Jefferson,
basta!
was inaugurated, let's say.
Ceremony unit. You can
All right, we've got another video coming up. And we have these great videos that are taking
First
you
official
through
actions taken by the newly sworn